Alright guys, we are in for a treat today. We're going to be looking at an Akiba Rubinstein game. So if you guys don't know who he was, he's one of the most famous Rook Endgame players, I would say, aside from Steinitz. Those are the guys you'd want to be friends with if you were around back in the day, you know, before Dvoretsky's endgames, Silman's endgames. You'd kind of just want to pick their brain, be like, yo, how are you so good at these endgames? And then they'd probably tell you and you probably wouldn't understand, and they'd still be the best Rook endgame players. But the other fascinating thing about this game is its positional mastery. I think there's a rotation in here that should be known by every single chess player, and it's just beautiful. It's almost as beautiful as that presidential debate, right? Who do you guys think won that? I'm so curious what you guys consider on politics. I tend to like politics. Well, I hate politics, but I like a guy that's running for president. We could say that. Bishop to b5, bishop to b4. This is a symmetrical Spanish. See, we get the 4 knights, and then we get the bishop b5 and bishop b4. Castles, castles. I mean, imagine running into a trap. Like, imagine, like, agreeing to your opponent's, what is it, all the structure of a debate, and then just coming in and destroying on their terms. That is savage. I mean, that's like allowing your opponent to pick which opening to start the game in and then completely dismantling him. That's respect. All right, so we get bishop takes knight. Now you get doubled pawns. So white gets the open b file, but we get the good structure, right? Because doubled pawns, though pawn on c3 is good for white. Now we're not going to go so symmetrical, so thankfully it's not a game that will put us to sleep with bishop takes knight. We got bishop to g5, a pin, and now queen e7. Can you guys think about why queen e7 was played? We're getting into chess now, I promise. Queen e7 was played, well, typically when you shorten the distance of a pin, the pin becomes stronger. So you'd be like, okay, why queen e7? But the point is knight d8, knight e6, and to boot the bishop, and then control f4 if it slides back. That's kind of the point. So we get queen to d2. Now we get knight to d8, and bishop to c4. White's like, I know you want to go knight e6. If you go knight e6, I'm going to take you, and then I'm going to have a good bishop. So he goes bishop e6. He's like, if you don't take me, I'm going to take you and triple up your pawns. It's like, triple up my pawns? I'm sliding back. Now we get bishop takes bishop. Now, which pawn do you take with? I think the more intuitive move is c takes b3 because it undoubles the pawns. But he actually takes with the a pawn, and this is just as good, if not better. Why? Well, you get the open a file, so this rook can't rotate away from the a pawn, because then the a pawn will hang. This is actually not such a bad pawn structure, right? Everything is next to each other. There's no isolated pawns, so they can trudge up the board in an endgame together and, you know, be strong maybe. We get knight e6 as planned. The bishop gets out, and then we go pawn to h6. Pawn h6, it really does look like a hippo. I mean, I've had this set up multiple times just with my knight on g6, but yeah, black is going to apply some kingside pressure. He goes pawn to a6. Why? Well, remember when this rook was pinned down or tied down to the a-pawn? Is it anymore? No. So that was the point. Cool move. Bishop to g3. I don't like this move. Getting out of the pin, but it was because he was scared of a knight from coming to f4. But now the knight comes to h5. We get 2 knights that could come to f4. You don't really want to take this bishop. Okay, why do you not want to take this bishop? That's a question I just thought of. Well, because then you won't control f4 anymore with your knight, which is arguably what your advantage in the position is. So we get d4. White's trying to blow open the center, right? You don't want to take, because if you take, you just undouble their pawns, and that just looks bad, right? Sometimes it just looks bad, and then you can trust that it is bad. So what do you do against d4? Because they have 1, 2, 3 attackers on e5. We have 1 defender. Look at this. Knight e to f4. Not a hard move, but a cool move, right? It's defended by this knight. It cuts off an attacker. So now there's 1, 2, and we have 1, 2. So we're chilling, right? They need more than you have for it to be a threat, typically. There's no one rule covers all in chess. That's why we love this game. So we get bishop takes knight, knight takes bishop, and that was a bishop, and pawn to g3. Now, literally any move under the sun is fine over here, so kind of just pick one. Look at that. Even queen e6 is fine, because if take, check, and you win the knight. But he wouldn't take the knight, so these guys were good. Knight to g6 and queen to d3. Okay, what is the point of queen to d3? Not too intuitive, But if you're thinking it's to stop f5, then good job. Respect. Pawn to f5 can now not be played because the queen covers f5. So we get queen e6. He's like, no, 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 no. I'm going to play f5. White's like, okay, you can play f5. Go for it. All right, pawn to d5. This is the first bad move of the game, I would say. Like, bad move because he's attacking e4. So why would you make e4 the base of the pawn chain, right? It's like a asymmetrical or symmetrical French. You guys get what I'm saying. But yeah, he's attacking the base of the pawn chain now. It wasn't the base before you made it the base. So not good move. Queen to d7. Of course, he still needs to defend f5. White takes. Of course, black takes with the rook. Right, you're the one applying pressure. The f file is the semi-open file on the board, and now you're going to build up on it. We get knight to e4, and naturally, black doubles up. Thank gosh this pawn was on a6, right? But okay, if you could trade one piece on the board right now, which would it be, right? We're asking positional questions because this is a positional game. But wait for the Rook Endgame. It's also incredible. So the only trade you should be looking for here, English. We are speaking English. So these two knights, which one is better? White's is better. Because even though black's is like okay, you see it doesn't really have anywhere to go. And even though white's shouldn't move, white is in the best spot. Can't push the e-pawn, right? Because if we could push the e-pawn, we'd be winning. Right? This pawn would be here. We'd go boom, boom, and win the game. Or win the queen. But this knight is defending f2. That's why it's so good. So this one knight is neutralizing these two rooks. That means we should trade knights. But how do you trade knights? Right? Maybe you can envision, I don't know, knight h8, knight f7, knight g5, but then they go f4 and they stop at 3-move rotation and 1 move. Look at this. Try to find it. Pause the video. But it is knight to e7, king to h8, knight to g8, and knight to f6. You might be saying, how did he have time to do all this? Well, the center is locked and the center cannot be blown open because the center cannot move. So you have time for these rotations, kind of like the last game we reviewed. And now he gets the knight trade, right? Don't be cute about it. You know, you didn't go to f6. He's piling up on f3 to untie his knight. So take the knight. You know, don't get cute about it. Just you did it to trade knights, trade knights. We get queen takes and queen d8. Okay, pay attention to this. This is one of the most beautiful ideas I've ever seen in chess. We get queen to g4 here. Black is slightly better, but how to capitalize? I think naturally most people might say queen g5, rook g5, but then you're going to get a boring game. We don't want a boring game. So let's ask positional questions. Is white weak on the light squares or the dark squares? He's weak on the dark squares, right? Because all these pawns are on light squares, so there's a bunch of dark squared holes. Now, when you start looking at the dark squared holes, you might be like, I wish I had a bishop. I would pin the rook and do good stuff. Well, you don't have a bishop, but you have a queen. And can't queens act as bishops? You might be getting it now. Queen to b8. Queen a8 also worked. But you see, you don't want to go c6 and queen b6. You might thought that because it looks more natural. But then you destabilize d6. And then he can like split apart the pawn structure in the future. So queen b8, this is incredible. He saw this when he went queen d8. I mean, gotta love this. So queen b8, queen a7, right, hitting the weak piece now. Then queen c5, improving the queen. Queen b4, improving the queen. This queen made 5 moves in a row. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah, right? Something like that. 5 queen moves in a row, and it went from d7 to b4, and white's position hasn't changed at all. So you've improved a piece, and they have not. So, okay, rook to f6, positional again. He's like, okay, maybe I want to move my other rook, so I'm going to untie it from being stuck because of the queen. Now, king g8. Why king g8? This is such a great game. King g8, because if we traded all the pieces on the board, and white's king was on g1, g2, that is, and we were on h8, they would win, typically, because their king is closer to the center. King g8, now their king is not closer to the center. So always keep in mind the relation between the kings and the other pieces and the fact that it might become an endgame sooner than you think, sooner rather than later. Queen c3. Okay. Now you're like, I improved my queen, and now I have to trade queens? Nah, I got to move my queen. This is where tunnel vision is bad, right? Because you might be like, I got to move my queen away. But then all of a sudden, white is winning. Or not winning, but trudging forward. He's going to go b4, hitting the queen, c5, destabilizing everything, and then his rooks are going to be just as good as your rooks. You don't want that. So you can't move the queen, but you also don't want to take. Because now, all of a sudden, I would say white has the pull again. He has the mobility in his pawns. So a5, beautiful. I'm sorry for saying beautiful so many times, but that's what this game is. So queen takes, pawn takes. You might be like, why do we have doubled pawns? Well, the reason you have doubled pawns that are now undoubled, so both sides undouble their own pawns, you claim the a file. That is why you have the pull. What white should have done here is gone c5, trying to destabilize everything as a last-ditch effort, and then the game could be roughly balanced. But okay, he goes king h3, and yeah, Janowski was no Rubinstein in the endgame. We could say that. b6, the best move, right? Because c5 was his one chance to blow open the position, and he didn't take it, and now he can't because Rubinstein stopped it. King g4, I don't know what white is doing. King h, where's this king going? It's in a box, literally. Maybe he wants to play f4, but I mean, you can't play f4. We will see why. So he goes king h7, king g6. This king, look, it almost looks like it's getting checkmated. Now these rooks clink to each other. And see, this is what's crazy. Equal in the opening, roughly balanced in the middle game. And then this is where the end game comes in. So no matter how good of a player you're playing, if they crumble in the end game, it's never too late to win a chess game. It's never too late to lose a chess game also, right? That's what makes that saying exist. So we get rook to h2, aiming in on the pawn on h2. f4, okay, now what to do? Well, there's two good moves here, h5 and takes. He does it this way, and then h5, and you're just picking up the pawn, right? Because if king g3, I don't think this is what happened in the game, but we'd get rook g1. If they block, we take, and we win the pawn. And if king f2, we would go here. That might be what we got in the game. I forget. Let's see. Boom. Ah, that is what we get in the game. Let's go. So rook f3, we win a pawn. We win it this way, though you could win it either way. And now we are in a rook endgame up a pawn. So, phase 2 commence. Let's pay attention. King f5, use your king, right? Unblocking the g pawn, protecting the rook, also keeping the king cut off. King to d3. Now, what to do? What is white's only weakness in this position? Well, you could say that you have a kingside majority, which would be true. But this b pawn is unprotected. Look at this. Check. The king has to move. And if it goes here, like if it goes back, you could just trade and you're in a winning pawn endgame. Because then the weakness would be that pawn side majority. So he goes king d4, rook b3. What this does is it forces, after a couple checks, it forces b5. Now you can never get c5. So one would think. Right, this is good for black, symmetrical, and you're winning. So equal on one side of the board, winning on the other, that is a win. We get rook to f3, good move, cutting off the king. Also, you can imagine white is trying to get to the 7th rank to threaten the base of the pawn structure. So black does have a weakness he needs to be careful of. We get king to e4 attacking the rook to f6 protecting itself, and rook to a2. So you're trying to get to a7. Pawn to g5 using his advantage. Now what do you need to play? You have to play check. Right, so these tempo gainers, I mean, you could go rook to f7, but then why would you not gain a tempo, right? The difference of a result of an endgame is a difference of one singular tempo, so gain a tempo and then protect the pawn. Black's going to go c5, and now be careful. Let's calculate. So if b takes c5, what is white's plan? He wants to go b6, and then we're pinned. So he just wins. So that's crazy. You're down 2 pawns, but you can't take because takes, and that's easily winning. And what else? I mean, if check, they just gain a tempo on the rook and then get through. So if takes with the b pawn, white is winning. So it takes with the d pawn. Right, you have to take because you're still pinned. But then d6, and aren't we losing again? Well, no, because remember that check that forced them onto the d file? Now you pin them. Rook takes c7, rook takes d6 check, king e4. Still not easy. Just to show you guys, let's say you're like, okay, I'm going to go h4 and just win real quick. Rook c6, you lose. Why do you lose? Take is black's king in the box. No, it is not. And if you don't take, they go like rook to g6. You just go king f5, and now they're in Zook's one. They actually have to take, and you're just quicker. So it's never too late to lose a chess game. So he gives a check. Now he goes h4. See the difference? And the point of h4 is to try to escape. He's imagining a bunch of checks and you escape. Now you might be like, why didn't he go rook c6? And well, the reason is he just knew that this was a losing endgame, right? Rook to f4, or d2 is actually easier because that forces pawn to h3, and then you could just go rook to d3 and pick up the pawn. So he went rook to c8. We get a check, again, gaining a tempo. Why not? He pushes the c pawn. White gives some checks, gives some more checks, but then look at that. That was kind of like triangulation to get to g4, because if you get in front of the pawn, you just win. So he goes pawn h3, shutting it off. Pawn c3, trying to make a queen. We get a couple more checks, no more checks, and now he protects the pawn and attacks that pawn. And we get rook to c6, and actually white resigned in this position because rook takes h3, rook takes b6. You just go rook back to f3, cutting off the king. They might be like, okay, rook c6, but pay attention. Always pay attention to the relation between the king and the key squares. I would say a key square is the promotion square, but look what happens if they just start pushing pawns, right? You might be like, whoa, they just promoted. No. Queen h2, you pick up the queen. So this was a masterful game between Rubinstein. Have you guys ever seen this game? Rook Endgame mastery, positional mastery. It's kind of like the debate, a winner and a loser. So as always, thank you guys for watching. Hope you have a great day. Peace.